Hi everyone, it's Astra, and I want you to think about dystopian movies. 1984, The Hunger Games, Blade Runner, Wall-E, right? Wall-E, because of the trashed world, right? What do we think of when we see dystopian movies? We think of an element that is added to our lives currently that makes the world or the universe or whatever setting dystopian, right? That's where dystopian movies, uh, why dystopian, that's what interests people. Is we have our lives. A lot of people can say 2026 is a dystopia, and they would be right. We have our lives, and the concept of a dystopian movie is to add something, an element that is dystopian. Now, the element can be removing. What do I mean by that? I mean, I don't know. You have less rights, you have less money, you have. But the fact of the matter is that that is an element that is added to, kind of the reality that we're in, right? Even though it's technically taking away something, if you understand what I mean. There is some sort of reason why the movie is dystopian. The society in movie is dystopian. But what about if we look at our lives here? If we look at our lives in the real world, if there were elements that were removed and we were kind of in another world, another kind of reality, right? We could look at this world, and this world has some things that would make a great dystopian movie, right? So things like, I don't know, hunger, for example. So you have to eat 2,000 calories a day. I mean, and it's true, like food tastes good, right? Restaurants are, they're kind of nice in a lot of ways. But the idea that in order to sustain energy and to live, that the whole world has to accommodate for that. There has to be farmers, there has to be truckers, transporters of food. Uh, you know, People have to collect the crops, the vegetables. They have to raise the cattle, the pigs, the sheep, everything of the sort. And you have to eat every so often, or else you'll get starved and eventually you'll die. That is kind of a good concept for a dystopian movie, or at least kind of an interesting movie, right? Because there are positive things about like having to eat. Like flavor is amazing, for example, right? We get a lot of enjoyment and fulfillment at the same time, as much as it is kind of a dystopian pain in the ass by eating. But I think one of the most interesting concepts, because we can talk about death, right, and how death would be a dystopian concept, right? Like, if death didn't exist and we were in kind of a separate world, I guarantee you there would be movies, dystopian movies, about cessation of existence. Um, and in the state, at least, that your atomic structure as it is removed, is altered, right? It's not removed. Atoms don't go away. We are actually billions of years old in atoms, and we come from other humans, other plants, other animals that are now deceased. My calico kittens, for example, were made from previous humans. Um, so, but anyways, one of the most interesting that I can think of is sleep, right? Because we could talk about death, how that would make, but that's kind of, standard. What about sleep? Right? Because there are some good things about sleep. For example, I can imagine that if we didn't require 8 or 9 or 7 hours of sleep, then maybe corporations would make us work longer, for example. Right? And there is kind of a relaxing feeling about closing your eyes when you're really tired. But it's the idea that for a third of your life, right? Because life expectancy is like 80 years old. For a third of your life, you have basically no idea about anything surrounding you unless you are kind of woken up by an extremely loud like anomaly or kind of a painful sensation or something. You have absolutely no idea what's going around you in the world, your family members, your personal life, what's going on across the street. In a lot of ways, you might as well be dead for a third of your life. So, I think that would make a really good movie if we lived in a world where perhaps we didn't have sleep. Perhaps we had some other way that we kind of conserve our energy, right? Besides sleeping for 8 hours a day. Maybe we're like kittens. Maybe we sleep 15 to 30 minute periods every single kind of, moment. Like every 30 minutes or so, we take like short naps or something. Right? But this idea that there's this 8-hour continuous period where the world is spinning and you have essentially zero awareness. You have zero awareness that your heart is beating or your lungs are even rising. I think that would be a very interesting concept for a dystopian movie, provided that it was not our reality. And so you kind of have to think, right, that there are many elements to our lives that in other worlds would make great dystopian movies that people would absolutely fear they would fear that it would rattle the skeleton out of them. Can you imagine how scary sleep as a concept would be in a world where it didn't exist? It would be fucking terrifying, right? Provided that death and harm exists in kind of the way that it exists. That would be fucking terrifying. Absolutely, we would be terrified. But because we live with it, it's not terrifying. Right? And so, you kind of have to wonder in dystopian movies, where our world is super polluted and we have to live on a spaceship, or the Hunger Games exists. You have to wonder, sleep is very extreme when you consider that it's a third of your entire life where you are basically in kind of like a death-like state. You kind of have to think, would the people in the movie be extremely scared? Or would they be kind of closer to where we are with our elements of life that in, alternative scenarios people would consider scary. Scary. It kind of makes you wonder, So that's something that I wanted to share. I thought it would be fun to share that. So, yeah. Anyways, thank you all, and have a good day. Goodbye.